Hello, dear listener, and welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. Your cold open this week is nothing but a warning, and perhaps a plea for forgiveness. Phil's mic quality is terrible at points in this episode, and I sincerely apologize. We will do our best to have these issues sorted out soon, but really it's a connection issue, and, well, according to Phil, that's Brexit's fault. So, blame Brexit. Blame Phil. Just don't blame me. Enjoy the show. Alright, here we go. Hello. Hello, welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connery Bush. With me is Phil McKenzie. We are talking to you today about fights. Is that right, Phil?
We are.
Okay. This has been Heavy Hands. Thank you all so much for listening. No, we've already put this off for a bit. We're right smack in this schedule, folks. I know some listeners really hate to hear about this, but guys, there's so many fights. Someone help me. There's so many fights. I'm feeling so overwhelmed by them again. We had Russia last weekend. Next weekend we have Sunrise, Florida. That's not a real town. That's where this next one's taking place?
It is, apparently.
This is bullshit.
In the BB&T Center. I don't know where that is either.
So, we are coming here to talk to you about some UFC fights. There was also Ryzen last weekend. We may or may not find time to mention that. But what we really want to talk to you about is, I don't know, Game of Thrones. That's what we spent about 50 minutes discussing before the before we actually hit record here. No, let's see, folks. Okay, let me get into it. I'm really getting into it now. Coming up, we have Jacare Sosa versus Jack Hermanson, who is, of course, a replacement opponent. This was originally supposed to be Jacare Romero too, wasn't it?
I think so. They've been... this is that whole shebang where they've been mixing up Jacare, Romero, and Costa.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and they've been spinning the roulette wheels, and they've eventually come up on this weirdness.
On Jack Hermanson, which is, not probably that sort of top echelon middleweight matchup we were all hoping for, but interesting. I cannot say that this is not an interesting fight and a weird, unexpected opportunity for Jack Hermanson, who's nonetheless, except for when he fights lefties, continued to do very impressive things in the octagon. So we're going to talk about that. We're not going to spare any but the harshest and least analytical words, I should imagine, for Greg Hardy versus Dmitry Smolyakov. The UFC literally had to bring in the lifeguard who got beaten up by Cyril Asker. That's right, folks. I have beaten Dmitry Smolyakov up in the octagon, and yet he's back because they need someone, for whatever reason, they need someone that Greg Hardy can beat. Because this is the thing with Greg Hardy. Not only is he an asshole, not only does he not seem to draw any interest, but he's bad at fighting. So that's your co-main event. But we've also got a bunch of other compelling stuff on here. Honestly, it's not that bad of a card. Cowboy Oliveira is fighting Mike Perry. That's interesting. Glover Teixeira is fighting Ion Cutelaba. That's interesting. John Lineker is fighting Corey Sandhagen. Probably a bad idea for Corey Sandhagen, but interesting nonetheless. And after we get into all of that and whatever else besides, we are going to look back at some of the stuff that happened last weekend as well. Alistair Overeem beat Alexei Olenek with relative ease. Other stuff happened as well. A Shevchenko sister lost. That's important. We'll get to that later. But first, Phil, why don't we start with UFC Sunrise?
This card is actually, really awesome. I mean, the main
bad.
card in particular is just... I mean, it's just all these different flavors of violence. We've got, submission and ground and pound violence. We've got kind of brawling violence. We've got pressure fighting violence and John Lineker violence. And then we've kind of got domestic violence with Greg Hardy, but let's ignore that. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a really action-packed and relatively meaningful main card, I think.
Yeah, I even like the look of this, the early prelims have a couple highlights on them. They're fighters you will recognize, and they're like redemption matchups. Angela Hill versus Jodi Esquibel. I like that at this point for both of those women. And Jim Miller versus Jason Gonzalez. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like an action fight for Jim Miller. It doesn't mean too much, but are we really trying to push Miller into really meaningful matchups anymore? I'm kind of cool with this whole card. I'm actually also interested in, though I don't know how fun it'll be, but I'm interested in Andrei Arlovsky versus Augusto Sakai. I think Sakai might be a serious heavyweight prospect. So I really can't complain. As much as the schedule has ground me to dust at this point, and will do so periodically, I'm guessing, Phil, for the rest of my short life. I really can't complain on the merits of this card because it looks good. Except the Greg Hardy part, but otherwise looks great.
Yep. Until it breaks you finally, and you end up in the insane asylum.
Yep.
This is the kind of stuff you want to watch.
Yep.
So yeah, Sosa Hermanson. Let's talk about it. It is, I think, just on first merits, it is looks like a tough matchup for Hermanson. We've talked about him as being someone who suffers against southpaws a lot because he can't get his jab going. I think that is very true. But having looked back at his most notable non-southpaw loss, which is Thiago Santos, you can see there's another sort of commonality there which might be troubling. And that is just pure aggression.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the guys that Hermanson has been beating recently have been, skilled and dangerous and generally somewhat passive.
Yeah.
With somewhat of the exception of Gerald Meerschaert, who is just a big, giant, fun mess. And Jacquerie is neither of those things. He's not a Nicholson or a Meerschaert guy who is just so open that he can just be destroyed by any kind of focused aggression. Nor is he someone passive enough to let Hermanson just get his game rolling. So I think if you look back at the Thiago Santos fight, the main thing is that Santos did kind of what he did later on against our boy Jan Blachowicz, is that whenever Hermanson tried to throw the jab at him, Santos just came back with 2 or 3 strikes. Mm-hmm. And you can see that Hermanson likes to build. He likes to establish something. And in the southpaw matchup, that matters because he just couldn't land his jab. But against aggressive counterpunchers, that's a problem as well. Uh-huh. And that is kind of what Jacare does.
Yeah.
That, we talked about it a lot before. He's not a deep counterpuncher, but he's a very, very willing and an extremely tough one. So the main question for Hermanson is, how does he actually build on Jacare without just opening himself up to counter body shot, counter hook to the head, counter overhand, or double leg and clinch?
It's a tough question because it's funny that you mentioned him getting overwhelmed by more aggressive fighters. It's kind of funny that in some of his recent wins, he's just been doing that. Mm-hmm. He's just been flipping the paradigm and being the overwhelming aggressive fighter. It doesn't really settle for me whether or not he has solved that issue. And I think, you hit on something really interesting there. Hermanson does seem, maybe this is uselessly granular, but he does seem like he's particularly susceptible to having his rhythm broken, or to only succeeding when he can establish a rhythm, when he's sort of dancing with his opponent. And against the southpaws, that tends to be a problem because he doesn't land his jab, and that's the first step of every dance move. So he never gets started. And with more aggressive fighters, or ones who are countering his shots like Thiago Santos did, it breaks his rhythm as well. There are obvious ways he could get around that problem. For example, let's be honest, Jacare's counterpunching, it's pretty much 2 punches. Mm-hmm. It's very Glover Teixeira. It's overhand right, and it's left hook, often left hook to the body. It's pretty straightforward. So it shouldn't have to take that much careful preparation to think, all right, I'm going to train this pattern 1,000 times a day. Jab, dip, and step to the left. You know what I mean? Get under the left hand, away from the left hook after you jab. And then you'll be ready to come back with more. Hermanson, I think, physically and where he's dangerous, what he's good at as a fighter, he could be a Robert Whittaker-esque challenge for Jacare. Right? Like, the answer is laid out right there in the fight that Jacare had with Robert Whittaker. There's no way I would pick Jacare to win that fight in a rematch, because his style is just not suited to deal with someone who can poke him and then get away and then hurt him every time he does bite down and try to swing back. And Hermanson can be a more nimble kind of fighter like that, but I think he's a lot more susceptible, like you said, than the likes of Whittaker to having that momentum just sort of broken and having to start all over again once he starts to get tagged. And Jacare is incredibly tough and has great timing and hits hard. He will tag Hermanson on the counter. So, yeah, it's a tough problem.
It's also the fact that, like, Hermanson has gotten almost all his wins
on the ground.
Yeah. Or, maybe sometimes in the clinch, but he's never really beaten anyone in a pure stand-up fight. So the question then becomes, can he just win a physical head-to-head grappling match with Jacare Sosa? And it's more of a question than it would have been in the past, for sure.
Yeah.
Because Jacare is clearly physically declined from his peak. Like, he's no longer as crazy fast as, I think he's still probably about as strong as he was, but I don't think he's quite as durable. I don't think his gas tank is quite as good. He's, you can see, like, the Terminator walk across the octagon when he finished Derek Brunson was not necessarily, it wasn't just him being badass. It was also, the fact that he is a much more plodding man than he was back in Strike, because he's picked up a ton of injuries, and he's been doing this for a while, and is he 40 years old now?
39, but yeah, coming up on it.
Yeah. So it's not a guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that Hermanson can't grapple with Sosa. I mean, I wouldn't have thought. He's successfully grappled with Lates and Branch, who are both exceptional grapplers, and finished both of them. But obviously, Jacare is a fair level above even those two.
Oh yeah. And even there, again, we still don't like the Branch one. It's like, well, how much do I really know about Hermanson's grappling game? I saw a good grappling move, and I saw it executed in circumstances where it was probably particularly likely to work. I just don't think Dave Branch was just not prepared. Did not realize he was in danger. It was like someone getting Von Flued for the first time. Like, as good a grappler as Dave Branch is, he either A, has never had that deep arm-in guillotine pulled on him, or B, did not expect Jack Hermanson to be capable of pulling it off. And Hermanson knew what he was doing. He hit the transition very quickly. It was great. But I still have not really seen him I've never seen him grapple in exchanges with someone like Jacare Sosa. It's very difficult to say. But I do agree with the point. Like, there's this tendency in MMA to go on thinking forever that a specialist's the specialized area of a specialist game is just forever untouchable. Like, no one's ever going to be able to out-grapple Verdum. No one's ever going to be able to out-grapple Khabib, out-wrestle Khabib, whatever. But, like, these things do happen. People get old. We have seen Jacare struggling to grapple with people before, and I think there is some evidence to suggest that plodding, counterpunching Jacare is maybe a man who doesn't feel comfortable grappling people at all anymore, who maybe feels that it's very tiring to tie up with people on the ground and would much rather stalk while picking up big shots here and there. We haven't seen, like, for example, we didn't really see Jacare push for a grappling match with Kelvin Gastelum. That should have been kind of surprising, right? Like, he's way bigger than this dude.
I think he did early.
That's true.
I think he just kind of exhausted. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think he kind of exhausted himself doing it.
Yeah, and then against Chris Weidman, there probably wasn't the option as available, but he didn't even try it because, I think it would have exhausted him. So there's an opportunity there, but realistically, I just don't really trust Hermanson with, like, a really serious athletic resistor. I just don't trust him to keep to persevere through a tough fight, because that's the kind of thing I have not seen him do often enough. He either has a really, like a closely contested but impressive performance, or he wrecks someone. But anytime he's put in trouble, he doesn't really come back.
I will say, like, the Lates fight was tremendously impressive from that perspective, because that was the one where he got his rib separated or something, and then came back to finish Lates. I mean, I think he's a very, very mentally tough guy.
Yeah,
I think
I don't mean to question his
that
toughness. It's a momentum thing.
I mean, I think the problem is just that he's just got a lot of tall man problems.
Yeah.
You know, that we see across a lot of that. He's not. You have to be extra coordinated to be able to control just long limbs in defense, and so he's particularly vulnerable off the back foot. He's not an amazing athlete. Mm-hmm. He's probably an athlete on the level of Lates in his prime, let's say, which is not. He is certainly not a Jacquerie, Sosa, Anderson Silva level athlete. And even Klein Jacare Sosa is probably still, he will always have, for example, a significant strength edge over someone like Jackson. But yeah, I think just as a very, very coordinated in order to be able to not get the kind of things that happen to you, like that happen to guys like, Moicano versus Aldo. It's the fact that, when these guys get pushed back on the back foot, it's very hard to suddenly not be opened up with a lot of real estate open for the other guy to hit. So a basic change-up for a very tough, very hard-hitting, pressure fighter just going like body and head is pretty difficult for them to deal with. And, similarly, he's just not very defensively sound anywhere apart from, through incidents of distance.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a correct read to me. Yeah, like both stylistically and physically, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Hermanson, I mean, is this again? I don't want it to sound like I'm questioning the man's toughness. Like, ooh, he gets hurt and he just can't come back. I think, whether for purely stylistic or, as you very strongly suggested, for partly physical reasons as well, he just has trouble regaining rhythm. After an opponent sort of, forces him into an uncomfortable position, he just kind of falls behind a lot of the times. And I would point out that Thales Lates is perhaps not the best guy to test, your longevity against, because he too is going to absolutely, the wheels are going to fall right the fuck off once he gets to the 10th minute of the fight. So
I will say, going back to the point we mentioned about the grappling being an untestable area, is that there's a lot of guys, and specifically a lot of guys who have amazing, overwhelming top games, who are then comparatively much weaker off their back. I mean, so I think you mentioned this briefly, is that Romero against Sosa, is that when Romero knocked Sosa down in the first round with the spinning back fist, a lot of people were like, oh, you should just wait for him to get up. He's clearly hurt. And Romero just went into his guard and just fucked him up.
Yeah.
That often these guys have such overwhelming top games that the fear of that kind of bleeds through to their opponents, like not trying to attack them from the top. Like they'll be like, I don't want to grapple with this guy at all. I don't want to, but Lates was probably quite shocked at the fact that Hermanson just kept taking him down and kept going for ground and pound on him.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that confidence and decisiveness can go a really long way against someone, like in that uncertain point when a guy starts to get old and you're like, how much of this is aura, is reputation, and how much is actual present skill? Like when Robert Whittaker got taken down by Jacare and got his back taken, there was a 3-second point where literally every MMA fan of any experience or knowledge watching was like, oh shit. It's going really bad for him. It's over.
Yeah.
In Robert Whittaker's mind, he just very calmly did the right technical things and escaped. And then it was like, oh, you know what I mean? Like Holly Holm, very, very adequately defended the submission and grappling attacks of Ronda Rousey in their fight. No one's going to say that she's a better grappler, certainly not a more potent offensive grappler, but she approached that the correct way. She was just confident and knew how to deal with these specific threats. So yeah, like it's distinctly possible that an aging Jacare could face a Jack Hermanson who really aggressively wants to take him down, wants to hit him with hard strikes from top position, and just sort of discombobulates him. And it's Jacare who can't get back on track.
Yeah, because if Jack Hermanson is a really, really dynamic threat, it is ground and pound. He is fucking ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his ground striking is terrifying.
But yeah, so I mean, it's a fight where you can't really pick Hermanson. I think they got a lot of interesting wrinkles to it, and it's where you can see a bunch of different outcomes. And a fairly significantly possible one is just that Jacquerie just fucks him up out of the gate.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm feeling. Like, Jacare's athletic, he's got the timing. I don't think Hermanson might just dive in there and try to take him down. I don't know. He might do something crazy unexpected. But in all likelihood, he's going to struggle with that first layer, at least in the first round. He's going to get hit with counters. Jacare's going to start walking him down. I feel like I have to pick Jacare. Phil, do you have a robotic and digitized pick to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably I think Jacques is quite possible.
Okay, I think that was a Jacare by. What was the pick again?
TKO?
By TKO, okay. We've got a Jacare.
Is my sound fucking up, by the way?
Yes, that's what I'm laughing at. So we'll end this segment. Both of us picking Jacare. Should be a fun fight. Like I said, it's interesting. It's not the one that we all wanted and we're eagerly awaiting, but Jack Hermanson is not a pushover middleweight. He's an interesting, aggressive fighter, so it should be fun. We'll take a break. When we come back, hopefully Phil's audio will be rectified, at least somewhat, and we will move on to the rest of this card, but not Greg Hardy. Sorry, bitch. After this.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
And welcome back to Heavy Hands. We have taken the bold and innovative choice of running down this card in reverse chronological order. Please do not look up UFC Sunrise on Wikipedia, because then you'll realize it's just the order in which they're listed on the page. Skipping right over Greg Hardy and the lifeguard, who will hopefully not guard his life. Cowboy Oliveira and Mike Perry are fighting in a welterweight showcase. Phil, thoughts on this matchup?
It's another chance for the UFC to get Mike Perry fucked up real good.
They are. At this point, I've lost all emotional investment. My heart can't take it. If I care about Mike Perry anymore, knowing the way they're going to match him, like, here we go. He gets another athletic freak he's just going to smash into for as long as it lasts until one of them dies. That's this matchup.
Yeah, the problem here is that Mike Perry has not gotten any better over his last. He basically reached what looked like he had his most impressive performance probably against Ponzinibbio, and has since kind of looked like the same guy. Paul Felder, I guess that win is fine. Sort of had some issues with the fact that Paul Felder isn't the greatest striker in the world and relies on having to clinch up, as we mentioned in the pre-fight, and also due to the fact that Paul Felder broke his own arm. So he's he hasn't really gotten a lot better over his last few fights. Oliveira, again, not really someone who I would say has improved a tremendous amount, but he is I think a more natural technician than Mike Perry.
Yeah.
Like he just has a deeper instinctive grasp of I'm not even necessarily technique, but just how to fight and how to win.
He has more feel for it. He moves.
Yeah.
He moves with a rhythm. You know, he's like, this is the very, very non-technical analysis, but there are many different meanings that you could apply to the term athletic or athleticism. And I often try to make that all-encompassing. Like, anytime we try to define that term, I'm like, well, you know, proprioception. Like, that's an element of athleticism we don't really think about. Like, your ability, like hand-eye coordination, agility, balance. Those things are influenced by certain sort of unknowable athletic parameters as well. Oliveira has more of those than Mike Perry. Mike Perry's very tough. He's got the outrageous aggression gene in his body somewhere. He hits hard. You know, he has a lot of the natural makings of a fighter, but Alex Oliveira seems like more of a fighter, more of a pro fighter. He's just looser, you know? He adapts to situations more naturally without having to think about it. Mike Perry can't adapt at all.
Yeah, so, I mean, the question is that we've seen a bunch of Mike Perry's wins, and they all tend to look pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And Oliveira has actually won in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yes.
We've seen him as a counterpuncher, we've seen him as a pressure striker, and we've seen him as a grappler. And he's not deep in any of these areas, but he is tremendously confident and physically completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a chance that Mike Perry can just pull him into the same kind of fight that Yancy Medeiros did, and just sort of pull him into exchanges and maybe just straight up outpunch him. But Oliveira has just proven more willing to go to more areas. I mean, as we've, the dynamic we've talked about a couple of times, Oliveira can fight going backwards in this fight, and Mike Perry can't. Oliveira is, I think, the longer fighter, which means that we could be looking at kind of another Griffin-type matchup. I think he's going to be able to pull Mike Perry into counterpunches a lot, and if he's not the better wrestler, he's the more willing and effective one. That if they lock up, whilst Mike Perry has his best skill set is in the clinch.
Yeah.
Just hitting elbows and knees. I think once he has his hands on people, there's a chance that Oliveira gets overly focused on just going for double underhooks and hauling Perry to the floor and just gets kind of fucked up in the clinch. But Oliveira has plans in his fights.
Yeah.
He's like, this guy is a striker, I'm going to wrestle him. This guy is wrestler, I'm going to counterpunch him.
Yeah.
He has ideas of how he's going to approach fights, whereas Perry, it just seems like he's just going to plod forward and look for big punches.
Yeah. Perry has the Conor McGregor mindset of, I don't want to pay attention to my opponent, except that his style, unlike Conor McGregor's, is not one which really demands any difficult decisions out of the opponent. You know what I mean? It's a very simple problem to solve. Stay the fuck away from him. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, I've got to hit him, and anytime I try to hit him, he might kill me in that moment. Ooh, when do I make my move? It's more just like, just don't stand in front of him. It's a pretty simple dynamic with Mike Perry. I will say, like, I'm even worried. You said he's not getting better. He might be getting worse. Like, he's definitely going through a transitional period right now with the move to Jackson Wink. Although now he's, like, back with the girlfriend who was cornering him before, and I think, like, engaged now. Who the fuck knows what's going on in the insane personal life of Mike Perry? And however that influences his decisions. But, like, for example, his one area of what seems to be genuine skillful expertise, or at least a comfort zone, the clinch, may now have been diluted by his experiences at Jackson Wink, and my evidence for that belief is something called taking down Donald Cerrone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, getting to the clinch on Donald Cerrone, not a terrible idea. He's pretty good there, but he's also kind of vulnerable. Get there, hit him with some elbows, rough him up. Nope, take him down right away, get submitted. That's what Mike Perry did. So it's really the lack of thinking that makes me that I can't trust Mike Perry to make the right decisions, and any new things he may be learning, I don't trust him to curate those new techniques into a functional game, into a functioning whole. So I have to pick Alex Oliveira.
I'll also say that if Oliveira brings back those snap kicks to the body, the ones that he was using liberally against Medeiros, those seem like they would be nightmarish against Perry.
You mean for Perry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great weapons against him, I would agree.
Because he'd just plod forward and eat them a lot, I would guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he's even lost some of that sort of bladed stance he was taking on for a while. So it's going to Jackson Mink, he's now square, stalk forward man. So absolutely linear kicks down the middle. Do it, cowboy. Yeah, by the way, I don't trust Alex Oliveira all that much either.
No.
He's a man with an ego. He's a big, strong athlete. It's very possible he ties up with or gets hit by Mike Perry and decides he wants to prove something. I think that's a distinct possibility in this matchup. But I just can't. I have to trust him more than Mike Perry because, again, I have seen him win fights several different ways. I have seen him adapt. I have seen him approach opponents of varying threats with, just different kinds of game plans. Very basic level shit. But if you fight Tim Means, you take him down. I get that. You fight Donald Cerrone? Oh, wait, he did take Donald. No, he got taken down by Donald Cerrone. Wait a minute. Did Cowboy also take down Donald Cerrone?
No, I think he got taken down.
Okay, that would be all right.
I think Cerrone blast doubled him, but I'm not sure.
I think that's right. Okay, so at the very least, that's a simple enough way of demonstrating the dichotomy here. Alex Oliveira did not immediately try to grapple with Donald Cerrone. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Light heavyweights. We'll cover these next two relatively quickly. I think they're the only two we'll be covering before moving on, or rather moving back to last week's card. But Glover Teixeira and Iwan Cutelaba are fighting at light heavyweight. I like Iwan Cutelaba. I like his weird name that isn't pronounced the way it's spelled. He's incredibly tough. He remains just 25 in the light heavyweight division. He's got quick hands. He's a pretty deft scrambler with some scary ground and pound in his back pocket. He's just he's a really promising looking young light heavyweight, and one of a few. We'll talk about one of the other ones maybe when we get to last week's recap. But this does strike me as a matchup designed to, this is a pretty clear gatekeeper matchup. We don't know what to do with Glover Teixeira. We just fed Carl Roberson to him for no reason. Now let's see if Iwan Cutelaba is any better than that.
Yeah, so the problem... So this is basically throwing exactly the same style matchup that Iwan Cutelaba lost a few years ago at him again.
The Misha Cirkunov fight?
Yeah, exactly. And saying, okay, so you thought that you could walk forward invincibly against pretty much anyone.
Yeah.
And then you found out that there was a level of pressure and technical wrestling that you couldn't. Let's try that again against someone who is both more experienced and more skilled than Misha Cirkunov, but also a good deal older.
Yeah, a good deal older. Our second 39-year-old of this card.
Yeah. But it's for that reason, I am not sure what to think about this one. Because Teixeira, much like Jacare Sosa, as you mentioned, he's got some real similarities, very sort of monotone, but reasonably completely devastating from the straightforward pound pass and then either pound out or arm angle top game. But
could you repeat that last sentence, Phil? You're cutting out again.
God damn it. But yeah, he has just he's even got a slightly similar ground game to Jacquerie.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Pound and pass, and then either go for the TKO from top position, or take mount, or go for the arm triangle. The sequences they follow are pretty similar as well.
Uh-huh.
So he's not a tremendously difficult fighter to prepare for.
Yeah.
Is one of the kind of main elements about this one. But on the other hand, like, Cutelaba still has been someone who was he's entirely defined by just pushing forward and just going for it. So in his last fight against Antigulov, we saw the same Antigulov going for the same thing that he would do in his next fight that we'll be talking about later. Uh-huh. But it worked a lot more effectively against Cutelaba. Like, he got multiple takedowns on Cutelaba. And I'm just not sure I can trust Cutelaba to survive against Glover Teixeira. I mean, would I be shocked if he has like this a fight where he basically gives up multiple takedowns to Teixeira, survives on the floor, tires him out, and then knocks him out late? I would not.
No.
Can I predict him to do that? No. I can't. I just can't predict anyone to give up takedowns to Glover Teixeira and survive.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with any of that, especially like that Gajimurad Antigulov fight, because we now know how single-mindedly Antigulov responds to running into resistance. Again, a fight we'll be talking about shortly. But when he fought Cutelaba, he immediately got Cutelaba to the fence and tied up in a takedown battle. And Cutelaba did show some better takedown defense, I will say. He showed some good, he dug for underhooks, he got a nice wide base, he was turning away from the fence, and each time he got a good position, he was landing a strike. But I trust Glover Teixeira to deal with that position differently. You know, I trust him to start chain wrestling, to say, okay, this kind of takedown isn't working, but now he's made himself vulnerable to this angle. I'm going to trip that leg out from under him. I'm going to try to run the pipe and dump him on this side. And Tugalov just he really, really wanted to hold on to him because he started to get hurt. And Cutelaba just basically, in the last minute or so of that fight, as I remember it, was just sort of wailing away while someone was desperately but very unsuccessfully trying to take him down. Teixeira is a different proposition. Teixeira is a much more calculated and precise puncher on the feet as well. I know I made it sound disparaging when I compared Jacare's striking to Teixeira's, but it's very effective. It works against the vast majority of opponents because these are usually counter punches. He presses forward, he waits for you to screw up first, and then capitalizes. And the right hand is a perfect companion to the opponent's, a perfect counter to the opponent's jab. The left hook is a perfect companion to that right hand. They are two serviceable punches that work for the purpose he usually needs them for. So, it's a very functional game. It's really just the age, I agree, that has me, questioning this. I don't trust Teixeira's durability anymore, and I have supreme faith in Cutelaba's durability still. I have seen Teixeira, I think, when Jacare too, and again, these guys, looking at it now, getting finished by Rumble Johnson and Alexander Gustafsson isn't really that bad of a look. Those are two fairly devastating punchers. He also took an assload of punishment from Gustafsson before finally going down. So I don't think there's enough, I haven't seen enough frailty in Teixeira yet to pick against him here. Because I think it's like you said, it's still the same style matchup. I guess the difference is, I will point this out. When Cutelaba fought Misha Serkinov, it was actually a really great performance from Serkinov. A lot of it boxing from outside. Mm-hmm. A lot of working off his jab, a lot of counter straight right hands. That is the kind of thing I do not expect out of Teixeira. So what happens if Cutelaba just meets Teixeira in the middle of the cage, can stuff a takedown or two, and starts pushing Teixeira backwards? I think that's a much worse situation for Glover than if he is able to press forward. So
I think the most likely scenario for a Cutelaba win is actually that he gives up takedowns and then starts to fight them off more consistently. I think we just see that if we see the Antigulov performance, albeit less dramatic. I think that's kind of how it happens. I think he gives up takedowns, but then just keeps standing back up from them, and then eventually the takedowns stop coming, because that was the main thing in Glover's fight against Corey Anderson, is that Teixeira just could not keep up.
Yeah.
It wasn't his durability, it was his cardio.
Yeah.
That seemed to be going.
Yeah, and Cutelaba has the youth and therefore a pretty clear advantage in both of those fronts. So yeah, I think that's true too. And again, the Antigolov fight, Cutelaba was much harder to control. He got taken down early, but he popped right back up. He's always been a really good scrambler. I think what he's still in the process of learning is patience. Is sort of learning to fight methodically. He's running into trouble and not just trying to smash your way through it. If he can apply that. Yeah, but again, Antigolov fell apart so quickly, I do not expect Glover Teixeira to fall apart like that. It's going to be a lot less dramatic, and that's the difference that has me still picking Glover here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a decision. I think I trust...
Oh, that sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, I trust Kutelaba's ability to scramble out of bad positions on the ground, but I don't necessarily trust his ability to be able to get up 2 rounds out of 3.
No.
I just think he's going to be in bad trouble when it hits the floor. I think he can make it out of there, but I just think, like I said, you can't give up takedowns to Glover Teixeira.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's just too, and he doesn't tire. He will never tire out when he's in top position. So Kutelaba's periods for tiring him out are going to be short. I think he maybe can do it. I think we might get a bit of a scary 3rd round for Glover, but who knows? I
think that's a possibility for sure. But it is a little also worrying that the specific submission that Serkinov caught Cutelaba with was an arm triangle. Mm-hmm. And that's like one of Teixeira's 2 moves. So that is concerning as well. It could be a submission. But yeah, it's an interesting fight. Again, good main card here, another good fight. I'm really intrigued by that one. All right, why don't we actually take one more break? And when we come back, we will hit the last fight that we really want to cover from this one. Probably the first one many of you will have wanted us to cover. John Lineker versus Corey Sandhagen. Guaranteed action and a super ballsy call-out from Corey Sandhagen in that one. And the UFC, how they do this. We've seen Mike Perry. If you are too brave and or too dumb to know better, they will give you the terrible, frightening matchups you ask for. After that, we'll move on to recapping the best of last week's card. Overeem Olenek, Makhachev Tsarukian, and all those other names that you have already forgotten after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Sweet. Thanks for the recommendation. I think I'm more likely to pick up a book recommendation currently than I am a movie recommendation, much to Zane's chagrin.
No.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to hit...
You cut out. Were you asking, as you usually do, are we going to hit women? That's usually what you're asking.
No, I was going to say children.
But girl children. You only hit female children.
Yes,
wow.
They are traditionally slightly weaker and...
Wow, I thought you were about to say traditionally sluts. I really thought you were about to take it to that extreme.
No, self-preservation is the only thing I think of in these situations. I will only pick the opponents which have the lowest possible chance of fighting back and causing harm.
So it's really just the essential weakness.
Yeah.
Okay. Not how sexy you think they are.
No.
Okay.
No, it's all just about it's all just like a physical dominance thing for me.
Yeah, but how?
It's not sexual. I mean, disabled kids too. They're fine.
So how sexy they are is entirely beside the point, is what you're saying. You do find them to be very sexy.
It's all just a violence thing. My sexual drives have been long subsumed beneath just the bitter violence which consumes my soul.
At this point, what is the difference between pleasure and pain, if you really think about it?
Right. Yeah. That can be our next. That can be our next Patreon episode.
Yeah, I've come up with your new title. It's I'm your host, Connor Rubush, joined with, as always, my co-host Phil Pinhead McKenzie. He doesn't know the difference between pleasure and pain, but he wants to kill. Phil, how you doing?
Yeah, we need to figure out a way to present like slideshows through the Patreon format.
Mm-hmm.
So some kind of we can use one of these free. Here we see my first victim. Do you see?
Do you see?
Then...
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. You see no bite, motherfucker. Shall we?
Yeah, let's go into a dimension of pure evil and pure suffering and pure John Lineker.
Okay. All right. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's see. Corey Sandhagen, John Lineker. This fight was originally made once before, was it not? In fact, I believe Corey Sandhagen fought Mario Batista. Phil, how did I manage to forget that was even a person? I completely wiped that bout from my memory. But there was a forgettable opponent that Sandhagen fought in his last fight. It was supposed to be John Lineker, I think. And now they've redone it.
Yeah, they've gone back to it, and it is still an awesome, amazing, incredible fight, which is exciting one on this card, and also one that it's sort of hard to see Corey Sandhagen win.
Yeah, it is very hard for me to see Corey Sandhagen winning this. I'm just going to look at his record real quickly. Let's see. The two blue names. I know this is not the most scientific way of assessing a Wikipedia page, but the two blue names of among 11 on his Wikipedia page are Austin Arnett and Yuri Alcantara. Do those seem like men that will prepare you for what a John Lineker fight is? They seem more like people that Corey Sandhagen can style on. And no one gets to style on John Lineker, Phil. I mean, I guess not even TJ Dillashaw got to purely style on John Lineker. He beat him. He still ended the fight with 30 seconds of running away and having his ribs smashed. So it's a whole new experience for Sandhagen. Sandhagen is brimming with confidence. He's technical. He's exciting. He's really creative. Even more so than he is technical, he is creative. But he is going to be in here against an opponent who, for the first time, just probably at a certain point, will not allow him to think of what he wants to do next. Will not give him any space to breathe or consider his next move or calculate any adjustments. He is going to be, as everyone is who fights John Lineker, reacting nonstop. And I don't trust Corey Sandhagen to be equipped to deal with that.
Yeah, Sandhagen, I think, he's really becoming like bantamweight's Carlos Condit.
That's a fair description, yeah, or comparison.
Yeah. He's just a big, tall guy who is just pure violence everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we haven't really seen the kind of limits of his durability, much like Condit, but it seems likely that test them. I mean, that Alcantara fight, Alcantara is like Lineker in one way, and certainly not physically, because he's, obviously a giant bantamweight with a completely different style, but he's like him in one way in that he can sometimes come out the first gate, come out of the gate in the first round completely aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
He will just put a blizzard of offense on the other guy. And that didn't look great for Sandhagen in their fight. It wasn't necessarily the fact that he did disgusting things to Sandhagen's arm on the floor, because Lineker is not that level of submission grappler. He's got a nasty guillotine, but that's pretty much it as far as he goes. No, it was the fact that Sandhagen allowed himself to get pushed into the fence right away and pretty clearly badly buzzed by an Alcantara shot.
Yeah.
And the one thing you have to be able to absolutely do against John Lineker is stay off the fence and be able to defend yourself well if you get there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the question is just like, so Sandhagen has been able, Alcantara kind of fucked him up pretty badly. Sandhagen has been able to get by just by pushing out more violence than the other guy.
Yeah.
And can he do that to John Lineker? I mean, if he can, it'll be tremendously impressive. I mean, the analog that I guess he needs to look at Marlon Vera's third round against Lineker.
Yeah, I mean, we know it's possible. Like, we have seen that Lineker himself is susceptible to some pressure, especially if he faces an opponent like Marlon Vera, and the height was a factor there. It really was, because Marlon Vera was able to beat him up in the clinch. He was able to take advantage. Like Lineker's little squat frame is quite an advantage for him when he's pressing forward, and you're like trying to punch off the back foot. It's just kind of hard to hit that little peanut head of his down on his little squat shoulders. Like, he's a difficult target. But when you can grab a hold of him and you're not worried about being taken down by him, then, which, you know, pretty much no one is, then that height becomes a serious deficiency inside. Sandhagen does have some clinch skills. I don't know that he's quite as comfortable there as Marlon Vera. And even so, like, well, I don't know. Because the thing is that Marlon Vera did lose a much more one-sided fight than I expect Sandhagen to lose here. And it seemed to tire Lineker out a bit, but I don't actually... It's a weird situation. I don't trust Sandhagen to lose the early portions of this fight with enough docility to then win big as the fight stretches on. Do you know what I mean? I think he's going to start to go to war with John Lineker, right, when he gets backed up into the fence. And Marlon Vera didn't do that. He went into his young veteran self-preservation mindset. And he took some shots, but he did what he could to survive and to kind of get his bearings. And I totally trust Sandhagen to, the moment he ends up in an exchange situation, to start exchanging. And so he is going to be absorbing damage as much as Lineker. I don't trust, and the only reason that Vera was able to push Lineker back is that Lineker started to fade. I don't really trust Sandhagen to tire Lineker out without doing the same to himself. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a ballsy ass call out for Corey Sandhagen. I respect the shit out of it, but it seems just like a losing fight. Like, there's always the chance that he could catch Lineker with that perfect shot on the chin. He's a great body puncher as well, Sandhagen. It's interesting that he might tire Lineker out better that way. It's one thing we haven't seen much of, is people targeting Lineker's body while they're exchanging with him. That's usually his job. So that will be interesting. But overall, the fight looks like Sandhagen probably getting backed up and then exchanging with John Lineker. And that doesn't end well for most people. Well, except John.
Yeah,
Lineker.
I mean, Vera kind of lost that fight, but he definitely lost those first two rounds fairly consistently, but he did a decent job of staying off the fence.
Yes.
And I think Sandhagen's solution to not staying off the fence will just be to go ham.
Yeah.
It will be to brawl with Lineker. And like I said, he's in many ways a better fighter than Chito Vera, but I don't think he's better defensively.
No.
Vera he's reasonably defensively minded when it comes to, getting his head off the center line and blocking strikes, and Sandhagen is really just about overwhelming people with offense. So if he goes toe to toe with Lineker, it seems difficult to imagine that he's gonna survive, and that Lineker's best moments often come when guys try and bounce off the cage and fight back at him, and then he just batters them back into it again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it could be a really incredible fight. I mean, this has serious potential, but it could also be one where, just as we've seen many times, a big tall dude who has been insulated by his range against most of the people, just gets pushed into the cage instantly and knocked the fuck out. Like, it's another one of these ones where, like, there's a serious chance that the favorite just kind of crushes the slightly tall, lanky dude right out of the gate.
That would not surprise me. Yeah, I just think that it's not that Sandhagen is not potentially equipped technically or stylistically to win a fight like this, but much like the fight Lineker had with Rob Font, who also, like, I look at him and I'm like, you could come up, you're equipped to have with the right game plan to beat someone like John Lineker. But, like, it was the first time he'd fought someone like that. This is even earlier in Sandhagen's career, and he has not faced anything like this. And yeah, his very first exposure to an aggressive, strong athlete with finishing potential in Yuri Alcantara went really badly at first. Really, really badly. And Lineker, unlike Alcantara, is not exactly known for crumbling when his first plan doesn't work. So, it's John Lineker all the way. I know the 2 or 3 Lineker haters among the listenership were really hoping I would come out hard for Corey Sandhagen here, but I have to pick John Lineker, folks. It's just a bad matchup for Sandhagen at this point in his career. Phil, do you agree?
Yep. I'm 100% there. I mean, maybe not 100%. Like I said, I think it could be competitive. I think it could be an amazing fight if Sandhagen, improves as young fighters can. But I think, going back to the Rob Font thing, I think, like, Rob Font, from my perspective, already had more of the pieces that I would expect. He already had the jab, the range tools, the basic discipline at distance, and Lineker still just kind of broke them. And Sandhagen, it's really just going to be like, he's just going to be testing raw violence against the man who is just raw violence itself.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. All right, shall we look back to UFC St. Petersburg, Overeem versus Oleinik?
Let's do it.
We'll try to run through these very quickly. More commentary probably than any kind of real technical breakdown. What stood out to you? What do you want to talk about from this card?
It was a pretty standard, crafty performance from Overeem against Oleinik. He just
is an old man.
He's an old dude, and I think the commentary team was heavily overstating how hurt Overeem was at almost every point. That he was clearly just working towards a point where he knew he could hurt Oleinik much more than Oleinik was hurting him, and that was kind of what happened. Mm-hmm. It was crafty, and it was kind of expected. Arman Tsarukyan, though, that was genuinely impressive. At 22 years old, and I don't think he has any specific wrestling background.
Yeah, I'm not sure what his background is, but his wrestling and scrambling has looked legit in all of his fights so far. And this is, unfortunately, he was one of those guys. I don't think, did we talk about Arman Tsarukyan last week at all?
Nope.
Yeah, Tsarukyan was one of the few people on this card who I will not blame you if you look at it as I did, and your immediate reaction is like, who the fuck is this? Why should I care? The answer is you shouldn't. You don't have to. It's fine. But upon reviewing his footage, like by the time the MMA Vivisection rolled around last week with that son of a bitch Zane Simon, I was excited to see Tsarukyan perform. So he's like a legit strong prospect.
Yeah, because he got into, it wasn't just the fact that he was able to stuff takedowns from someone like Makhachev, it was that he was able to hit chained takedowns on Makhachev, and that he was able to survive deep into grappling exchanges with him.
Yeah.
He was able to get out of anaconda chokes, he was able to sit out, he was able to stand up against the cage when he had his legs trapped. I mean, he ended up just getting outskilled somewhat, as you would very much expect to be the case in this fight. Yeah. But the fact that it took as long as it did, and the fact that it was as competitive as it was, is genuinely extremely impressive. Like, this is this reminds me of Hakparast against who was it? The leglock specialist, Marcin Held.
Yeah,
but Makhachev is a much better athlete than Marcin Held is, just in a pure horsepower sense. And so this is probably even more impressive than that. I mean, the issue is that Tsarukyan's striking has not caught up with his wrestling yet, but his wrestling is already at a very, very high level, and he's training at Tiger Muay Thai. So, sky's the limit.
Yeah, that's the thing I want to ask. Like, I want to see if Tsarukyan's striking will develop, because it seems like a particular stylistic problem that is not unique to him among like Russian sambists, where like immediately watching his footage and saw his striking, and the first fighter I thought of was Magomed Bibulatov. Like, it's a lot of moving around, a lot of disconnected singular moves, like real old school MMA striking, if you think about it, which is effective only because Tsarukyan looks like a strong athlete and has pretty good technique with those moves. But against anyone who's capable of like testing his striking acumen, there's no connective tissue to keep that game together. So, and that's the thing, is in a matchup against a guy like Makhachev, like, hopefully it's a learning experience where he's like, okay, I fought a guy who's been doing this grappling thing forever and is really, really good at it. I may have actually been able to beat this guy if I just had a more functional striking game, if I could flow a little better on the feet. So
it's also just like, he's kind of showed that he's going to be able to just out-wrestle the vast majority of the UFC roster.
Yeah.
And I think, this is good for him because it's a debut loss, which means that he's at 22 years old, he's actually going to get something of a normal progression.
Yeah, now he gets like a minute, just one precious minute to figure out to fight someone who's not like, I don't know, Kevin Lee or whoever they would have given him if he won this match.
Jesus Christ, yeah. But yeah, he's also training alongside Peter Yan and Rafael Fiziev, who are both like, I think very, very good strikers. I think Rafael Fiziev might be the coach at Tiger Muay Thai. But he got knocked out by Magomed Mustafayev, but it was just Mustafayev just doing weird stuff and catching him early. I don't really think it was indicative of much other than Mustafayev being a crazy man who is an insanely good athlete.
Yeah, I love Mustafayev though. I feel like every crazy man should have a bowl cut.
Yeah.
I think
Kevin Lee actually said that is the hardest puncher he's ever fought.
I believe it. He looks insanely powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that doesn't surprise me. So yeah, no shame there. Arman Tsarukyan, an addition to the lightweight division that is much more promising than your first glance at his black Wikipedia name may have suggested. Who else? Shall we cast some shade on Antonina Shevchenko? and both the Shevchenko sisters while we're at it?
You want to.
I sure do. Yeah, I don't even have much to say about this. It wasn't a very good fight. It was a Roxanne Modafferi / Shevchenko sister split decision. So you know what kind of matchup we are describing. Sort of gradual, inexorable pressure from Roxanne Modafferi. A revelation that Antonina Shevchenko is not nearly as good in the clinch or with her wrestling as her sister. That's always been a central part of Valentina's game, and Antonina has been like the pure kickboxer stylist for more of her career. But also, just love to see them lose. And that synchronized dance training routine thing they do is stupid. And it's
I feel like I've been the hater in the last few episodes, and it's good to know that like you've really taken up the batting with this time round.
I'm trying to take some of the heat off of you, So it is for that reason that I will say that if you were one of the like 2 or 3 dozen people who happily applauded for 2 women throwing synchronized high kicks to dreadful Eastern European techno pop, then you should be chemically castrated and removed from society. But I did enjoy seeing Roxy win. Also, who doesn't like Roxanne Modafferi? So, good shit. Great technical analysis there. What else we got here?
Your boy, Michael Oleksiejczuk.
Yes, my new boy. I thought you were going to say Krzysztof Jotko, but who I am very happy to.
You've got a new. You're a shallow man. You've moved on to a new sexy Polish, reasonably well-rounded guy.
Oh, that Connor! He's got a new boy every week, doesn't he? New boy on his arm. Yeah, my new boy is Michael Oleksiejczuk. Can I say something? I did not expect this turn in this man's career. There's a good chance, by the way, that a lot of our listeners right now are like, "Who the fuck is Michael Oleksiejczuk?" He is a recent-ish addition to the UFC. He has a complicated name that is not spelled how it's pronounced because it's Polish. But the thing is that earlier, all throughout his career, basically, his fights had a pretty similar sort of look to them, which is he would go out, get right into striking range, and get hit a million times really hard right in the mouth. His opponent would exhaust himself, and then he would overwhelm them. And throughout this whole process, repeating it several times throughout the early stages of his career, he did show some good boxing fundamentals. You know, especially as the fight would go on, we would see some very basic but nice, like, reactive defense. We would see a lot of body punches. It's one of the earliest things that stood out about him is that he is a prolific body striker. Combination punching, footwork, all of these things they were evident, but the whole game wasn't entirely functional, and they would always come out slowly over the course of the fight as after his opponent had wrecked him for a round, or at least hit him once really hard early. And now he's had 2 straight fights in the UFC where he has finished an opponent in the first round. He finished John Vellante with a perfect left body shot to the liver, and here he finishes Gadzhimurad Antigulov about 4 times in the space of 30 seconds, with basically a series of perfectly accurate and shockingly powerful uppercuts. That's awesome. Michael Oleksiejczuk may be, not only, I already liked him, he may actually be good though, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is that this was a light heavyweight winning fights in a way which, it was a young light heavyweight winning fights in a way which was good. Which wasn't, like, funny, or hilarious or weird. It was winning fights in the way that someone in a good division would have won them.
Yeah. Yeah. It is genuinely notable when a light heavyweight fight isn't funny. This was hardly funny at all. I mean, that says a lot.
It was a bit funny.
Well,
watching Antigulov, like, just desperately doing his best, like, Derek Brunson impression as he just charged Oleksiejczuk over and over again.
I didn't expect that out of Antigulov. Like, he went full Prochnio, you know, like he
You never go full Prochnio.
You never go full Prochnio. I did not expect him to react that badly to just getting buzzed. Like, I always knew, and of course, like, I think I picked Oleksiejczuk to win after Antigulov started to fall apart here. Because I was like, well, he also has a very clear pattern throughout his career, which is he smashes people early, and that's it. And we have seen him win just a couple decisions or fights into the second round, and he usually tends to get pretty damn exhausted. Still, I was really surprised at how badly he reacted to running into trouble early. It may have genuinely been, like, the Kudalaba fight and then this one, the first 2 times he's ever run into trouble early, and both times he reacted by just, like, doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on his insatiable need to run forward and tie up with his opponent and take them down. And yeah, Oleksiejczuk, like, the timing on those uppercuts was genuinely very impressive and attractive to watch. Those are some really nice, well-placed punches. That is exactly what you do to someone who ducks their head down and literally just runs towards you. You uppercut him in the face. So good shit.
Yep. Yeah, he's pretty undersized for a light heavyweight, but he's fast as shit. I mean, he's one of the things where, like, he would be like a Kelvin Gastelum-esque study of a middleweight moving up to light heavyweight and fucking people up, but he's just never done that because he's always just fought a light heavyweight.
Yeah.
But he is clearly like middleweight sized.
Mm-hmm.
He is 6 foot tall and not particularly bricked up.
Yeah, well, if he ever does decide he wants to move down for some insane reason and fight good fighters, I feel like they should match him up with Marcin Prachnio first. Just get his feet wet.
Yeah, how does he deal with the aggression of Marcin?
Right. I need to see him deal with that middleweight threat. So, okay.
Yeah. But, he's clearly, he's pretty durable. He's much faster than most light heavyweights. And he's probably going to get just randomly fucked up by some weird guy next time.
But he's got a lot of the good qualities for light heavyweight. Durable, quick-handed, pretty tireless, and a technical boxer. So, I am officially on board and interested to see how far Michael Oleksiejczuk can go. And that's pretty much it for all the interesting stuff of last weekend's card. Again, the interesting stuff is feeling farther and fewer between as we go deeper and deeper into this schedule. But next week, again, this card we talked about, we previewed here, it's good. The main card especially, very solid. Lots of good stuff to recap. We will be talking about that in retrospect next week, but also we'll be looking forward to a pretty solid-looking ESPN card. Ally Quinta is fighting Donald Cerrone. Cub Swanson is fighting Shane Burgos. There's Nordine Taleb, Sierra Bahadurzada is really bizarre, but I want to see it. And Kyle Nelson, who had a really impressive UFC debut, he's fighting Matt Sales, who had a really impressive losing effort against Shayma Moraes. So there's a couple really interesting fights on that one. So we'll be back next week, and I promise you folks, I will have mustered up the energy to care. I'm really going to try. Anything to tell the people about before we wrap up this episode, Phil?
Nope, just got our preview coming out, so we'll be hitting Hermanson, Jacquerie, but nothing else other than that.
Cool. As for me, I promised a Holloway versus, an Adesanya Gastelum breakdown last week. I set that aside in order to put out a Terrence Crawford breakdown at the end of the week, but I'm going to try and put out that. It will probably be a two-parter, but I'll look back at 5 incredible rounds between Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya. Should be coming out at least one of those articles this week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. You can find that and Phil's preview with David Castillo on bloodyelbow.com, and you can get in touch with the both of us on twitter.com. Phil can be found there at Evil Greg Jackson, and myself at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. And that's about it. So until next week, enjoy the fights. Enjoy your life. The weather's beautiful. Get outside, have a good time, and I'm really just talking to myself at the moment. So let's wrap up so I can go enjoy the sunshine. I love you all. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.